Well, I don't trust the research of the Australian Museum anyway, but I trust it at least to a certain degree. There are many scientists who are pursuing.
These are British Museum casts that sell them too, actually.
Right. Well, all I'm saying is that.
But what I've done is use them as a comparison.
A comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you look at the comparison, all you can say is if you align it this way, this could be the top of a brow ridge, right? It looks a bit like that. But of course, it's a huge, heavy thing compared to that. Would I be able to differentiate that from the ridge, brow ridge of a gorilla?
A woman paleontologist that was here back in November had a look at that, and she was pretty interested. In fact, I got all the skulls out for her, and she was quite convinced they were.
Well, as
university paleontologist at that, so...
Who was that? She might be interested to speak to the documentary series.
They shape that. I'll have to change it. It's too shaky, that part, isn't it? I'm going to have to... in fact, I'm going to type those labels out, I think, and have a bit more room. I got other marsupial bones. No, I haven't given you a lot of stuff in. So I get a few people come in here, and you'll get a bloke who's an authority on might be dinosaurs occasionally, or it might be someone on an old, or even shellfish, and I've had a lot of my shellfish identified that I didn't know the names of, by one or two people, so always bumped into stuff.
Lifetime, let alone 4 metre tall hominids. I mean, 4 metre tall hominids are not something that would be popularly accepted as being having been discovered anywhere apart from by you.
Stone artefacts, but no skeletons yet. But of course, there's the jewels and teeth over in Java and China. But what I want
I've been to Java to see the remnants of the Java man over there, and the models that they had certainly look very different to the
joint
you've got
Java
here.
Not the small bloke.
Well, no, the ordinary Java man. I've been to Olduvai Gorge to see the stuff that they've got there. So I've been taking a very active interest in the paleontology of the human remains, and I'd have to say that I'd have to describe yours as less than convincing in terms of what I'd need to convince me that there was 4 metre tall hominids in Australia.
Well, who was who was the paleontologist that you spoke to? Was the ANU? What's her name?
I have to get a first name again, but it was Edward.
So this is important if we're going to propose this as a documentary to the ABC, if you want to have this broadcast.
But the thing is that the establishment, you'll never knock that. You'll never shake them in this country. They've got to shake themselves. It's taken them a lifetime to find, except the Portuguese, but even some still arguing. Then there's that Dr. White who rubbish me on the ABC radio. But that's the funny part about it. All the rock inscriptions you've ever seen, or doesn't want to...
How about Father Matthew Ricci? What did he say about Ricci?
They won't look at the glyphs at Gosford, of course.
I thought you said 5 universities
They don't exist, so they're not allowed to exist, so they mustn't.
But you said 5 university people have been out there to test them, but they weren't speaking.
I've heard a number of people have been there.
Right. What sources is that? Just word of mouth?
It gets around, different groups I know. The thing is that...
so you can't actually verify whether they've been there?
It's like, it's like the doctors we've got today. You've heard of some of them, they don't want to accept some new treatment because they've spent 8 years getting their degree and
will contradict all their findings.
Somebody's got a new technique that might be life-saving, it's got to go through all sorts of bloody tests for years before anybody will accept it, and then new technique that might be life-saving, it's got to go through all sorts of bloody tests for years before anybody will accept it, and then very cautiously.
Right.
It happens in medicine, happens in everything, and in this country particularly, you've got historians have been raised on Captain Cook and the Dutch.
But you said to me those glyphs have been dated.
And if it's got to be Chinese, I say, they might have been here in the 1600s. There might have been a couple of Chinese vessels. But of course we had the Macassars come here and so and so. And this is how they tone it down. And now they're saying, well, there might have been some Portuguese here, and there might have been a couple of Spaniards. But they don't want to give credit to ancient civilizations to have the brains to invent the compass before the Europeans, or let alone boat building, and this is where they're falling flat. They'll be left behind in the end.
So where did you get that date that the glyphs were like 2,600 years old, which you said in the documentary?
Well, you can tell it in the different types of glyphs, but...
And you used the book, was that the Book of the Dead you used to decipher the glyphs?
These are from a particular period. That was given me by Dr. Alan Roberts, in fact.
What was given to you?
Dr. Alan Roberts.
What did he give you?
Well, he got the ratings on them.
Oh, he got them, right, okay. And where did he get them from?
Oh, some university people, I don't know, but he's...
Are you in contact with Alan Roberts?
Yeah, he's an historian himself, but because he's into biblical history too.
Yeah. Do you think I'd be able to speak to Alan Roberts?
Well, come back in 3 months. He just left last week for America. He's got on a lecture tour over there and he'll be back. Some of these are carved on the back.
Why do you chalk it?
Well, because they wouldn't have come out otherwise.
But surely you can pretty much draw whatever you want with chalk.
Not me.
Well, for the verification in terms of it being accurate, people would certainly want to see it surely in its situ.
What's that?
I said, well, for verification, people would want to come and see the thing in its natural state.
What did Rex say?
Huh?
What did Rex say?
He's just got it off.
Ah.
Something happened to his internal anatomy.
Oh, crick.
Crick.
Yeah. What did you think of the Phoenician head?
Most interesting in the whole place, this one here with
Which one's that one?
the one with the sun god. It resembles the Egyptian ram, Ra, sorry.
That one there?
Yeah, the big one with the, like it's got, it says there that's a boat, but I wonder if it's just a symbol. Could be a boat.
Yeah, that's the one we used in the doco.
It's interesting, there's small kids there, but they've got shields. What's the story behind this one, Rex? Do you know much more about this one? Is that, you reckon this is a
That's
ship?
a mystery stone. We don't know what. It could be a mixture of symbols or what. In fact, in my book I'll be mentioning how cultures of, what's his name, Dr. Barry told Harvard University comes from New Zealand. He had to get out of New Zealand for much the same reason I moved up here from Katoomba. The thing is that he was ridiculed for his claims that New Zealand was visited before the Maoris, which it was. But the thing is that he is the world authority on Ogham, and he's shown that the Celts have reached the American west coast, not the west, the east coast, and that they had various times been...
There's no proof that they didn't have better means of transport than we have today.
No, that's it. No, but Phoenicians and Celts, and sometimes Egyptians and Libyans were all with their families on big expeditions.
Make up for a barbecue.
Yeah, that's it. And they'd set up a colony, and over the years, they're getting that much tin and copper that they were...
Indeed, we can only speculate.
British Museum of Science in 1964, Janet Tomb would have been found in the Mara Valley somewhere, and she had been involved with the AW pictures resident.
But as you're saying, you yourself are saying that it's the British scientists who have been rewriting history in the first place. So why would I trust the science of the British scientists when they're totally contradictory?
If you read Raymond Bailey's God, Kings and the Titans, it said history in every country is always written from a patriotic viewpoint. So
certainly,
the Americans will tell you we've got the best pyramids in the world in South America. They'll always try to make out the Pacific was, many of them will always emphasise the explorations of the Peruvians way out in the Pacific. They'll try and show that the Pacific owes its culture to the Americas, the good old USA. Over there in Pommy Land, you've got, the old idea was, before Piltdown Man, the first humans evolved in Europe. They had to, and it came from an age when God had to be an Englishman. And of course then, good old Charlie Dawson, to get back at Sir Arthur Keith for various slights he'd suffered from him, he let him find the Piltdown Man, didn't he? It might have been or might not have been Charlie that buried it all, but you know,
how long
Sir Arthur Keith comes out. To think that only a few miles away at Chartwell, while Darwin was writing his world-shattering thesis, here in this bed of gravel lay the first Englishman. The skull of a monkey, the jaws of somebody else, and the teeth of someone else, and all filed down. And you would have thought they would have examined them under a microscope, which I believe would have already been in use then.
Yeah.
But he took them for a ride, and I say, good on him. It showed how pompous a lot of them were, and he showed them up, and a lot of them didn't dare stick their heads out in public for a long time, and Sir Arthur Keith was ruined by it. But he got his revenge on Arthur Keith. He didn't live long enough. Old Charlie died in about 5 years, but the Piltdown man at least made scientists come out with dating methods, like, well, the carbon dating was the first thing, and so we can thank Charles Dawson for that, because he forced these people to develop better dating technologies.
So do you think the current dating technologies are good enough to apply to your relics? And, yeah?
I think in fact, as time goes on, there's going to be even better ones. There's a new technique developed in Australia to do with light prisms, I forget what
Yeah,
it's called.
thermoluminescence, heating up the rock and the electrons coming through phosphite and calcite.
Something else.
Yeah, through prisms of calcite and phosphite.
Thermoluminescence has been around a while. There's something new that's been...
Yeah, I just read a New Scientist about 2 months ago. It's called thermoluminescence, is what they were talking about.
I thought they had some other name.
There's another method of trying to find out hoaxes and frauds, and that's intelligent analysis and questioning scientists, which is of course my approach, which is to try and question the historian, question scientists, find out what they're claiming, and verify through pure and simple experience. An experience of looking at the natural world and fossils is the way that a good scientist should always rely on their primary observation. And I'd have to say that I take a pretty dim view of hoaxes generally. Certainly there are people who have tried all sorts of manipulation for racial reasons in particular. To try and
like in India that caught him a while back with all the scientific worlds have to restructure all his datings and everything. His name was he was renowned worldwide, and he came out with discoveries of trilobites and earlier stratas and everything, and a couple of people got suspicious of it all and started to investigate themselves. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and the whole scientific, all textbooks and everything. So,
yeah, there is scientific fraud that goes on, but there are lots who are self-deluded. They actually think that what they're discovering is something new, or they like to think they've discovered something, so they believe it. That self-delusion is very common. It's common, and I could say that many people who falsify results, if you like, do it subconsciously. But then there are others who occasionally do it just to try and make a bit of attention or sell stuff or do whatever. And I see all of us are prone towards a certain degree of self-delusion and making mistakes in our assessments of things and drawing conclusions which are not, we could say, somewhat dubious. Like I'd consider that, say, if I found a rock like that, and I would believe peculiars for that writing, and I'd probably maybe think that I was maybe a bit deluded if I had thought that. But if I went and said, look, I'm absolutely certain that this is a whole good.
The lost work of an unknown New Zealand filmmaker, and they had you in right up to the last moment when they showed you the name of the fellow they used was a play on words from two plaques in the Film Archives building in Canberra. They just joined the first name of this bloke and second name of the other into one and made out it was this 1890s, 1900s period filmmaker in New Zealand who invented his own colour technology and everything, and he was forgotten by the government, and then there was a search involving dozens of people to look through his lost set for the great biblical epic he made up in the hills somewhere in South Island called Salome, and they showed you the old silent film. It was very well done. It had scratches in it.
It's not hard to do.
It was a beautiful hoax. And at the end, this narrator tells you we've actually taken you Australians, taken the mickey out of you Aussies, you know, because if you'll notice,
well, we don't.
on this plaque we've got this name, and over here we've got
Would
this
you,
one.
would you really
this,
like...
This inventor never existed, you know, the whole thing was a joke.
Do you really want, though, would you
Sat
like...
there laughing.
Would you like people around the world to think that Australians are stupid because they're gullible and get taken arrested?
Yeah, I mean, there's
You didn't that you think
well, no, it was just a joke, I guess, but it would only appeal to the average film person, I suppose, like me, but the thing is that...
But still, it shows the medium and its ability to manipulate truth.
Yeah, oh yeah, you can do anything with film. But
you can also tell the truth in films, and what do you feel about scientific truth and historical truth? Well, how do you feel about it?
Well, we certainly put that across in the media, okay? But,
how important is it to you personally to be absolutely certain about your claims?
oh, well, definitely.
So we agree to the dating for some of the relics, just because, I mean, the relics in a sense, they're not yours, they're not ours. You know, they're the earth, so to speak, and so neither the academia nor you can contain the vast and mysterious history of Australia. So it must be sort of presented for a lot of sources to examine. So I think it's important
On the other hand, I mean, when you
for them to be examined.
In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a hillside or paddock, you know, and nobody's been.
But what do you have to fear from having them dated, though? That's the thing. It's just a further evidence for the claim.
You could easily date the rock just like they can date those carvings down in Gosford. But I'd like to see somebody do it actually in Gosford. No.
Yeah, well, we'd like to do it for the documentary series. That'll be a part of the documentary, is because I think it's important for the viewing public to get a sense of, oh, what's going on here? Oh, they're dating the glyphs, you know, like, and be a part of it, rather than have someone just stand up there and talk about it. So
It's going to be half hours.
I think it's going to be, well, the ones on Australia, would be, or one on archaeology, would be two probably 1 hour ones. And I'd like to speak to that person Edwards from ANU, who's a paleontologist, and I'll be speaking to JP White, and I'll be speaking to you. I mean, I'll just be presenting everybody's viewpoint and the evidence and the lab tests, and I think it's very important to like set it on the table for the viewer to make up their own mind. I don't think anybody can contain the history of Australia. It's always being rewritten. Everything's coming up, and I think we should always examine it and scrutinise it. It's important to get these dates down for the history in itself, the essence of the history. No personal politicking. So it's
well said.
Apparently a Celtic message stone.
Yeah, so
Remarkably, they're all drawn up with chalk, and they could be just any drawings on the rock carved in very likely. It's full of bitterness.
yeah, we've got an opportunity to know that it happened. We can totally set up the whole.
You know what, I've had better interviews sometimes. Oh, it hasn't happened in the majority of the interviews I've had on radio have been pretty good. They've received the best interviews I've ever had, 2 Triple J. I went in there once when I was setting up a new studio and we did it sitting on the floor, there was no chairs. And I sat there for 2 hours while I taped, this mate of mine there who was working at the time taped a whole series of different episodes, 15-minute interviews that were to slip in between different programs, and yeah, he did a damn good series there, and we did something on the yam, and we did something on the pre-cooked stuff, and we did something on butterfly migration from them, and to show, I mean, all sorts of things, and I was really pleased with that, but
Yeah, Rex.
I just wish he was there, yeah. We've changed that much over the last few years.
And
When do you plan to get on to the
these
show
are
anyway?
supposedly ancient Middle East explorers' remnants. And here's this sign saying, leave offerings of fruit at the stone or the cord. Rex claims to be able to read many types of Celtic and Egyptian hieroglyphs, which I understand taken a great deal of analysis and are highly subjective. However, he is very certain about his. A Phoenician message stone found at Mallory, New South Wales, by Mr. Rex Gilroy. Translation: the eye of Ra, the sun, rules sinning. Well, that's what he reckons. It's mentioned in the Bible. He's very interested in biblical. This one is a mystery rock carvings in the Blue Mountains. Rex promotes many things from around the Blue Mountains of extraordinary discoveries. Peter.
American archaeologists always try to link back to America, they had children sort of Mesoamerican idea that that's where everything comes from.
Oh, it's not Nancy's and top of his views, is to say who's right. And the fact is, I'm putting all this into a book at the moment, 30, 40 years of work on my part, and here he is trying to play down the role of Australia in favour of America. National pride showing here.
Yeah, so we need everybody's perspective.
That's right.
It's important because then, see, some people have valid things to say, quite scientific, but at the same time, a few things they say might cut the mustard. But another person also has something good to say, and some of their things don't make much sense.
Actually, I want to have another look at a place on the other side of Gosford. There's about 5 or 6 other hieroglyphic sites around, but I don't know where they are. The locals, well, some old locals know about them. I suppose with all the houses being built around there, eventually they've got to turn up.
But
unfortunately, in a way.
you take us to some other sites you weren't prepared to.
Oh, no, I don't know where the other hieroglyphs are, that's what I'm saying. Eventually all the housing that's going on around the Central Coast, inevitably they're going to be found and get vandalised, I suppose.
But how did you hear about the Copper Pyramid?
Well, I'd heard about it on and off for years. But, I'm thinking of the hieroglyphs at Gosford, sorry. But in that case, actually I'd heard from a number of people over the years. I was saying then Paul White, who did a TV film, I don't think he got to television, he ended up selling it himself.
Yeah, he's shown us some, and he's very much, he argues against a lot of your findings, which when I haven't seen his
I mean, I'm not going to believe that UFOs had anything to do with it.
With which?
Oh, he believes UFOs had something to do with it because some of those hieroglyphs are UFOs, you see.
It took it 4 years.
The thing is that
we're only deciphering the hieroglyphs in one dimension.
His ideas go on, some people wouldn't go on the line. So what? But the fact is that he's putting out videos and things, and in one he said, and this looks like a UFO, and this is something else. His idea that there was a Khufu, of course his body's not really changed very pyramid. Naturally he was modified over here, brought over here, was saying very
right. So he's changed his tune 4 years later. He's saying that, oh no, the hieroglyphs represent some series of glyphs out of the book, and they'll just carve it, and you say that, that's it's going to Hitchhikers, that's why we date them.
To tell a long story short, you know what's happening in this country? You've got cryptozoologists, like in America, trying to destroy one another's credibility so they can put out a book and make a fortune. Get rid of the other bloke who probably started the whole field and push themselves as individuals. Push a certain individual to try and push himself as the leading authority on cryptozoology in this country when I started. And they're trying to push me away. In America, it's happening to people like Rene Hilton and others who started Bigfoot research. Oh, that is big business. There's people in America pushing and shoving one another out of the way because they know there's a lot of money in books to be made and television shows. and I was hoping we could avoid all that in this country. Now you've got people fighting over hieroglyphs and pyramids and knows what, and it's getting very much like Indiana Jones or something.
But surely what do you think about the approach of being skeptical and doubting everything the way Descartes did, say? Descartes, the French philosopher, suggested that we doubt everything, and that's how we develop our degrees of certainty about things. And surely science should be all about debating and being prepared to subject your theories and ideas and views to as much analysis from, I mean, that's what the whole of the scientific body of analysis rests on, is peer review and critical debate and analysis by other scientists and other historians. And it shouldn't be a closed club, as you say, but it should be virtually every single person who wants to know the information being able to freely access the information and verify it and talk to the person who's making the claims at whatever time. If they genuinely have a desire to inform the world, they will do that. You know, if they genuinely want to pursue truth, they want to know themselves whether it's true or false, and humility is probably the most important thing that scientists don't have, and it's important that people have the humility to realize that they might be wrong about things. This is Rex's butterfly collection, which is basically a collection that is largely bought butterflies. These are bought butterflies from South America, mass-produced ones. A lot of these butterflies have not been protected and couldn't be caught. These butterflies, these are moths, dayfly moths from Madagascar. They're now almost extinct because of huge numbers of culling by people wanting to collect them for their beautiful wings. Unlike most moths, these are very brightly colored moths, which is why everybody wanted them for their collections. I would suspect that Mr. Gilroy's collection largely came perhaps from his father and from other old collections, and he and his wife have decided to market something of a fraud. It's a bit small time, but then got caught up with the whole New Age thing and Nexus and people taking him seriously. And I think he's a little bit out of his step here. This is quite a nice old collection of butterflies. Nothing special, nothing exciting, nothing, and they're not very well maintained and kept. The wings all coming off. They're not well labelled. Many of them are not labelled at all. These butterflies will fade. He's got some of the butterflies he's had apparently for quite a long time, like 30 years for that collection in the box, which is a 100-year-old collection from Sri Lanka. God knows what Rex Gilroy is doing with it, but that is a very valuable bit of a collection if it was from Sri Lanka. And I'm pretty outraged that some of these nice fossils and butterflies, this butterfly collection and in particular shaped part of this great scam to do a Rex Gilroy style Piltdown man of 4-meter tall hominids and a bizarre cosmology about Aboriginals and inherent. But he sort of said that you can make films say anything. You can. But I'd be like, why don't you feel that if these are things that are the public history of the whole of humanity, really, that surely if you discover it or anyone discovers it, one would have an obligation, even a moral obligation to.
I just wanted to study them for a while, yeah.
But wouldn't you want many people to study, like the discoveries? Yeah, I'd say like the discoveries that I have made regarding the brain and neurosciences, one of the things that I think is very important is that the scientific discoveries should be immediately shared with other people who are going to give some critical feedback.